and Kablaya Hadithiya Vijana Foundation. On this cold day, one cannot think about all those people that are on the streets, that are destitute. We think of them and our hearts go out to them. And I would like to encourage all South Africans to reach out and touch their lives. My name is Thandeka Mbete. I am a mother. I am a wife. I'm a girl from a village called Kwanongoma in KZN, South Africa. What inspires me most about today is my love of working and learning from young people. So our topic for today is, lest we forget who we are, where we have been, and where we are going. The Youth Day of today, 2020, comes at a time when we are all grappling with the COVID-19. Not only is it affecting South Africa, but it is a global pandemic. We're currently sitting in devastating statistics of people that have lost their lives, and also of people that are affected, and people that are recovering, and also of all people that have loved ones that might have lost their lives. Our heart goes out to you guys, and we think of you, and may their soul rest in peace. And also, we want to give a shout out to all health workers across the globe, our essential service workers who continue to risk their lives and work tirelessly to assist and help other people. Without any waste of time, I just want to give a brief of what our Youth Day in South Africa stands for. So Youth Day in South Africa was called the Soweto Riots. They were formed by continuous unrest. Students and workers in township of every province boycotted schools, universities, and workplace, and the regime was hard put to restore the apartheid order. Students from numerous Soweto schools began to protest in the streets of Soweto in response of the introduction of Afrikaans as the medium of instruction in local schools. It is estimated that 20,000 students took part in the protest. They were met with fierce police brutality. The number of protesters killed by police is estimated to be 176, but estimates go up to about 700 that may have not been counted. In remembrance of these events, 16 June is now a public holiday in South Africa. So we're using today to commemorate this day and remember all the brave young people who put their lives out for us to enjoy the benefits of their selflessness. So this event has been put by two organizations, one being the Stella School of Integrity and Kabla Yahaditiya Vijana. The aim of the event is to create a platform for young people to learn about their history, give awareness on who we are, where we have been, and also map out on where we are going. So without any further ado, I want to introduce all my guests. One of our guests is Dr. Chris, who is all the way from the United States of America. And it is 5 o'clock in the morning for him. Before I greet him, I'd like to greet Mr. Jabu Nkosi. Mr. Nkosi, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me, sis? Okay.
Yes, I can hear you.
Wonderful.
Dr. Chris House, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Miss Shwabi Muruinoko, good morning.
Good morning, Tadega. Thank you for the invitation.
Mr. Velani Mboweni, good morning.
Good morning, Ma'am Tandega. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. And finally, we have Mr. Temba Mbebe. Good morning.
Good morning, Sister Tandega. How are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Thanks.
So before I share your bios, I want to just give housekeeping rules. We are live on 2 pages, Kaplaya Hadithia Vijana and Stella School of Integrity. And we would appreciate if all our followers send us comments and send us questions that they may have. We plan to have this discussion in 3 segments. The first will be who we are. The second segment will be where we have been. And the last segment will be where are we going? I think the youth has shown us how important they are in society. They continue to show and inspire us to know and value and see their importance in the society, not only in South Africa. We're celebrating the youth of 1976, but also we are celebrating the youth of post-apartheid South Africa. The youth that continue to innovate, to inspire and transform and call us to change and want to be the change that they want to see. I'm going to be reading our biography of Mr. Jabu Ngosi. Mr. Jabu Ngosi, driven by the intolerable nature of the apartheid regime, Bab Jabu Ngosi began politically involved in his matric year at St. Paul High School in the South African student organization, SASO. The organization was driven by the Black Consciousness School of Thought. His political formation and influence further came from the St. Peter's All Boys Association, a radical social justice movement under the leadership of former Member of Parliament and Mayor, Father Smangaliso Mkhwatjo. He went on to the University of Zululand, continuing his involvement in politics through COSAS. Already with mobilizing plans in place, the events of Soweto in 1976 sparked immediate outrage on campus. This led him being banned from campus for his political involvement. He spent 8 months on the run for his political involvement. He later returned to his hometown, furthering the agenda of political reformation, conscientizing and mobilizing the youth. Shortly after getting married, he continued to actively organize as a member of the United Democratic Front and the Witbank Organizing Committee. In 1986, it was a turning point, and as he was arrested by the apartheid regime security branch, alongside many now hold position in our cabinet. He spent 6 months in solitary confinement and remained detained without trial. Continuing the fight for liberation, approaching 94, he shifted focus towards a different struggle, realizing that the fight against apartheid had left the family unit destroyed. Him together with his late wife, were involved in the family life desk with the South African Catholic Bishops Conference, working towards rebuilding the family structure. They have written and spoken widely on various structures, thought leadership pertaining to the family. He is also a seasoned entrepreneur, a father, a grandfather, and a fitness enthusiast. Mr. Nkosi, thank you so much for your time. I want you to just give us an overview of what is your reflection today, remembering the day, June 16, 1976.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Jabungosi, as introduced, and maybe the starting point will be at the University of Zululand, because that's where it all started. But prior to that, I was quite involved after matric and all in Hammanskraal. There was quite a lot of activities against all forms of repression at the time. So at the University of Zululand, when June 16 was at hand, there were interminable meetings, student body meetings in that day, in the evening. But once we heard that some students had passed on and they were shot by the apartheid regime police, oh boy, hell broke loose in the campus. The campus was in flames, and we had to be quickly moved out of the campus. Helicopters were flying above us. It was just hell on earth. But after getting out of campus, we had to find our way home, because that was very short term. Police were all over the roads, and there was roadblocks everywhere. But eventually we survived it, but quite a lot of people never survived. Some skipped the country at the time, and they went via Swaziland to other countries where they found refuge. And some were killed in the process. So there was a lot of casualties at the time. But eventually what happened, we joined the struggle in all our localities, but we were to be in the background because we were on the run at the time, and where police, once were in the hands of the police, we could be exterminated. But we survived it. And an incident I can tell was when June 13 happened, right from the campus right to our situation, was that we noticed that a lot of people were passing on, and we had to spread the message throughout the country. It was virtually almost similar like Black Lives Matters. We felt that students were dying unruly and were to mobilize. And mobilization was virtually in every township. We would communicate between virtually all townships. It was difficult. Technology was not so advanced as it is now, but we made it. Like the old saying, when Soweto sneezes, the whole world catches flu. And it was a mess all over the country. And we had quite a lot of sour experiences. And locked up, some group of us were locked up at some stage in Richards Bay. And amazingly, it was not attempt to be political, but we're invading in an area which was allegedly supposed to be a white-only area. So we locked up for some time, but we released and we moved on, but we carry on to conscientize and carry on with the struggle. In our area in Witbank, we organized the students from a church perspective and would let students meet between us, Witbank, and Pretoria and Soshanguve, and that reinforced the struggle. That's why it carried on and perpetuated till some answers were coming up. We would remember that towards the end of 77, they unleashed that stringent rule of apartheid about Afrikaans as a medium of instruction. So that was losing the appetite. When students went back, we never stopped. It carried on. It was quite an involvement. But what we learned from the situation and what the message that would have for South Africans is that Oscar Peterson and many of those that passed on it was just a seed planted for us to value ourselves as a people and to fight for all forms of evil that we come across and to stand for human rights, and that we are not inferior people, that we are made in the image of God, and that we stand for truth, and that we are not something simple that can be exterminated at any time. So our people would learn from us and would carry on and give them courage that will eventually win the struggle. We started a communication between ourselves and people outside the country, and we were encouraged. The UDF days were very heavy. Some people were killed in the process, but we carried on from 1976 on with the struggle. And we made sure we make a difference in our communities. And we carry on to teach our youngsters today that education matters, but that no evil should be tolerated, that people should stand for what they believe, should stand for the strength they have as Black people and carry on. We know that, well, things have improved in our country. We have got a united and a non-sexist government which is standing up for us. But there's a few shortfalls. We still have poverty all over the places. We haven't sorted that out with HIV/AIDS, which is a problem in most places in our country, but we still survive. And we want to encourage young people to be strong, especially now that we also have another challenge, because COVID-19 is also creating some bruises in our economy, which will cause a lot of unemployment. Already, a lot of people don't have jobs. So we have got a responsibility as a people to stand up and stand for our rights and also stand for our human values. We should stand and believe in ourselves and eliminate those things that are a challenge to us. And I thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Bochabu. I think what is quite interesting is that history repeats itself. I'm going to move to Dr. Chris House, and just reflect on how history repeats itself. When you look at what was happening in 1976, what stands out is the police brutality against unharmed young people. And this is what is currently happening in the United States. And we see the role of young people also there as they lead this movement that is Black Lives Matter. And our hearts goes out to all the people that are dying. I mean, we also the death of George Floyd and what it caused. And what is quite interesting and what is quite profound for me is how young people still show that they will not accept injustice. They will not accept police brutality. So Dr. Chris, thank you so much for joining us. What can you tell us about what is currently happening in the United States, considering what the day that we are celebrating as well today in South Africa?
Thank you so much again for having me. This is, I think, an important conversation, and it really reflects the worldwide struggle for Black freedom. As I watched and read just on Youth Day and watched and saw the photo of Hector Peterson being carried, you know, it immediately my mind went to Trayvon Martin, who was killed in 2012, I believe it was, by George Zimmerman, which led to the creation of the hashtag Black Lives Matter, and then the movement Black Lives Matter. And what I see some similarities is that, you know, it is what we're dealing with is the impact and the effect of white supremacy, whether it is when the Dutch first came to South Africa, and then you have the laws of apartheid that, you know, make segregation and Black people inferior, those laws that were used to back that notion of inferiority or superiority, policies put into place, looking at the long-term effect of that. The legacies of apartheid are still present in South Africa. Every time I come, I see it. And I'm also looking at how the legacies of slavery, of Jim Crow, that idea, the ideas of inferiority of Black people across the world, and the superiority of white people, and then white people just as the standard, as the norm against which everybody else is judged. Those are still with us today. And what I also see is the legacies of resistance. That Youth Day, you have a legacy of resistance. There's a lot of oppression that is we're still dealing with today, but there's also individuals like the young people in 1976 and 1973 who stood up, who recognized that there was injustice. And we have those legacies with us. We have the legacies of the civil rights movement, of the abolitionist movement, of my ancestors, my grandmother, 8 generations ago in the 1800s, who was a slave preacher, who preached against slavery, who preached against injustice, who built a log cabin church where she preached against that. And so I take that with me, and you all have history of resistance with you. You know, what we're also seeing in this police brutality is we're seeing the length that people will go to maintain their power. You know, where they will beat people, they will shoot people, innocent people. But I keep seeing this this resurgence of this desire for freedom, the will to live, the desire to live free, the desire to fully live as God has made us to be, in the image of God, and then to want to live in an environment that reflects that. To want to live in an environment where we can have good health care, we can have food, where we can have a good quality of life. I see that coming up in both South Africa and the United States. And then also just the young people at the forefront of this movement. Every social movement in the United States and arguably across the world has been led by young people. Every movement in the Black freedom struggle has been led by young people. And so I think, you know, those are some similarities, but this idea that we're dealing with of white supremacy has impacted the entire world. Colonialism, you know, the I'm just going to use this word, the raping of the continent of Africa, the resources, the people, all of that is a product of this system that was designed a long time ago. And really, the driving force of it is capitalism. The driving force of it is capitalism. To you know, and so there's this pushback from folks in South Africa all the way across to the United States, the Pan-African connection. We're all in this struggle together. And so, you know, as we continue to mobilize, as we continue to fight, I think we're going to continue to make advancements. We're going to continue to see progress. There isn't equality in South Africa yet, because we could ask the question, who still owns the land? But we have made progress. And that's what we don't want to lose sight of, that we have made progress. And, you know, and now it's about influencing policies, influencing laws, and carrying them out, and not to allow, again, the love of money, corruption, even within ourselves. So we will compromise the ability that we have to make significant change. And so, yeah, I see those similarities between the two.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Chris. Let me just briefly tell our followers and also our panelists who you are. Dr. Christopher House is a lead pastor of Christian Community Church in Ithaca, New York. Am I right?
Ithaca.
Yes. Beyond the pulpit, he is Associate Professor of Communication Studies in Ithaca College. His research interest on Black Pentecostal social action, African American rhetoric, and rhetoric, race, and religion. Dr. House is an accomplished scholar and researcher. His writings has been published in scholarly and professional journals, including the Southern Journal of Communication, Journal of Communication and Religion, Journal of Contemporary Rhetoric, International Journal of Communication, and Journal of Race and Public Policy. His book, Living Witnesses, Stories of Holy Spirit Activism, Change Agents and Strategies, will be published early 2021. Dr. House is the host of the annual Holy Spirit and Social Justice Conference in Ithaca. Follow him on Twitter, on Instagram, at Dr. Chris House, and on Facebook as Dr. Christopher A. House. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Chris. We move on to a young person, Miss Shwabi Murui. I'm picking up on the role that religion plays in continuously giving us faith to continue and to soldier on in times like this. How do you reflect also on this day, Shwabi?
I believe this day was key for us as South Africans because it made it clear that people can stand up for what they believe regardless of the consequences at the time. Because I don't think the sacrifice was made easily. A lot of people died, as you said when you started. But people knew that not to fight meant death. And I believe that this is what is being called for us. And it's a key thing that we have to adopt as writers because, you know, the statement that was said that history repeats itself. I believe that history repeats itself because we are not learning from it. We are not changing. We are not reflecting, because if we were learning from the history that has been written, and remember that history belongs to those who write it. So as I reflect today, I'm convicted about the need for more Black writers, because if we don't write, and if we don't write from a Black perspective, a lot of other people will learn history the wrong way. I was thinking this morning that when I was in matric, or grade 12 as they call it, back then, we were taught about the exploits of Bismarck and Leopold. But these people, when they referred to the struggle heroes, they said they were terrorists. And now that shapes our perspective, right? So now in thinking about it, it's important that we write more, and it's important that we write from a perspective that brings the Black perspective, so that people properly learn that some of these people that were said to be heroes were actually monsters, you know, because they were heroes at the expense of Black lives, and that has to be said. So I think today, in thinking about faith and thinking about how we have to build, it's important that we teach the right perspective. It's important that we teach the right identity, to say that it is valuable to be a conscious Black person. Otherwise, you will repeat the mistakes of history and begin to you know, express the hate that was expressed towards you in dealing with your own kind. And for me, that's the key thing in today.
Oh, thank you so much, Shwabi. So Shwabi has been working in the development sector for the past 25 years. She's an administrator at Gateway Church International, a director at Curious Culture, and a published director at Kumo Books. She is passionate about community development, prayer, systems, innovation, and change. Murui publishes a bi-monthly strategic prayer podcast. She is a lecturer at the Stella School of Integrity, a published author, an editor, and an avid reader, and a keen observer of life and its process. Thank you so much, Fabi. I was just reflecting on how this hashtag Black Lives Matter actually unfolded in South Africa. And I've got young kids who go to private schools, and I saw how young people started writing about how they are experiencing racism in these private schools currently. And I think it continuously shows that young people cannot be silenced, that young people want their stories to be heard. So I'm going to welcome Mr. Velani Mboweni. And I just want you to also maybe give us a reflection that you have when you think of celebrating June 16.
Thank you, Mam Tandega. I appreciate your introduction. I think June 16 is probably one of those most pivotal moments in South African society that shows you the power of young people coming around a cause and putting not what they don't have, but rather what they have to good use to bring about change and be part of the history books that we celebrate today. When we look at youth movements over time, whether that's in business, in entrepreneurship, or social movements, it always starts with a cause around unity. And when we look at the struggle of young people in South Africa from 1976, it was particularly Black youth united against Afrikaans as the medium of exchange, as in education. But if you look at what has happened today, if you look at what's happened in the past few weeks, past few years, things like the Arab Spring, fees must fall, roads must fall. It's always young people uniting around an identity. And I think that constant momentum is definitely something that will fuel the path to a greater future. And I think one of the big benefits we see today is the access of information, how things are so readily available at our fingertips. You have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and even the concept of an hashtag, which in software is basically a link you would click to search relevant content. Just access to those kind of tools right now means our movements and our calls will be a lot more prevalent, far-reaching, much more accessible, and create a stronger identity amongst African people around the world. So I'm very, very excited about that. When I look at June 16, I typically put on the lens of comparative analysis, saying, what would the youth of June 16, 1976 be doing today if they had Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at their fingertips? If I asked Babu Nkosi there, would he be tweeting, Asambe markets, let's go somewhere and skip the country to Swaziland? What would we be doing? And even you could ask yourself, how would the government at the time be responding to such tools? I was in Ethiopia a few years ago, and one of the things we noted was governments would ban the use of telecommunications. They would be able to control what sites you could access. And, being an entrepreneur in the tech sector, I was obviously able to bypass that with things like VPNs that helped us get through all these things. But I always think about, they say every level has a new devil. And as young people, we've constantly been proving that we're, beating each devil at each level. And I'm personally very excited to see where we grow, taking the lessons from those who have done it before us in the past. And I hope maybe in the next 30 years or so, when we celebrate June 16, I'll be a lot older and looking at the young people at the time and saying, what tools do you have, and how united are you against, together with your fellow Africans in the world?
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you so much, Velani. So Velani is a South African entrepreneur convicted by the mantra, serve people, solve problems. He is the co-founder and CEO of Lula, a mobility startup connecting employees to private shuttles for a productive and affordable commute in African cities. He serves as a fellow at the Harambee Entrepreneur Alliance, a political economist by trade. He holds a BCom in philosophy, politics, and economics from the University of Cape Town, BA honors in politics, and PDA from Wits School, Business School. Velani co-founded Lula with the intent to make transport accessible, reliable, and convenient for people in emerging markets. Without access to transport, you can't access economic opportunities. Thus, you can't solve inequality and poverty. Most importantly, given that transport is the backbone of our economy, better ways to commute will result in safer, healthier, and cleaner cities and improve the quality of life. So we have young people who are innovators, who are solving problems that we currently have. I'm going to welcome a young person, Themba. Themba, what would the youth of 1976 say when they look at your life today, where you have been and how you have managed to transform your life and be where you are now?
All right. Sabona Sithandega, and thank you so much for this opportunity, and also greetings to all the panelists. If the youth of 1976 would look at my life personally, they would actually be more proud, of the role that they've played back in 1976. As we all know that the youth of 1976, they were fighting against Afrikaans as a medium of communication. And now if I put it or correlate it with my life currently, I managed to go from primary school, high school, and I even managed to go to university with a different medium of language, which is English. And now opportunities which are being presented to me and other young people currently, they are actually amazing, because we managed to go to university. We get to choose our own courses that we need to follow. We have NSFAS that pays our tuition fees. Now others, we have new bursaries which are converted now to, given to us as young people. And also the opportunities in terms of businesses, having knowledge and information being made available to us, actually they would be more proud for us.
Okay, thank you. Let me tell you who Themba is. Themba is a former TUT SRC treasurer and president. He is a former Mr. Emalahleni King. He is a founder of the Story of Glory. He is also a human resource management and an industrial relations professional. He is a co-author of Chronicles of a Broken Man. Themba is an inspirational and an accredited speaker, and he is also a philanthropist. So we see that the role that young people have in this current dispensation is quite vital. So I just want to throw the question to all of you on who we are as the people. I think, like Shwabi has said, it is important for us to take ownership of our own stories, that we tell our own stories and say and define who we are to the world, not what the world is telling us. So how would you define who we are as Black people? I'll start with Ms. Nkosi.
Oh, sorry, we're on mute. It's a very interesting question because we have to be ourselves. The most important thing is we should accept ourselves first. During the days of Black consciousness, it was because people were so indoctrinated that they had such great fears to fight the system. First of all, they had to accept themselves that they are Black and they are proud and they are people and they can do things and they are not second to anybody. And that is important education. If people can accept themselves and are able to go forward, then they will be able to write beautiful stories about themselves and success stories, not only success stories, struggling stories, because apartheid damaged mentally most of us. And as you can see, somebody spoke about change currently. Change is something that is very crucial. But if we do the same thing when we change, nothing changes. We can see there's still a lot of same principles. When people are annoyed with the school, they burn it down. But the purpose is now different. We should change our strategy. We're hampering our own economy. So we should learn to be a people and learn to own up things. Ownership is very, very important. We own the things we have and we carry
on. Dr. Chris? I think looking at the United States of America, I love the perspective you gave in terms of saying you still come to South Africa and you can still see how poverty, inequality still continues to be one of the biggest problems that we struggle with. But when I look at the United States, I mean, you Black people are a minority, which is different from what we have here in South Africa. But still, I still do believe that it is still very important for us to define who we are. So what would you say on that note?
You know, I think you're absolutely right. And I think defining who we are as Black people, as people made in the image of God, Black people made in the image of God, our Blackness is not a sin. Our Blackness is not a crime. Our Blackness is not a sign of a curse. There has been a challenge over the power to define who and what Black people are. This whole idea of race is made up. It's not biblical. It's not scientific. There's absolutely no evidence of it. And under the skin, we are 99.9% the same. It is a way of saying who's included and who's excluded, who will be included and will have access to power and to privilege and to wealth, and who is excluded. And we have to change. We are shifting. We're changing the narrative. Black people have never accepted the idea that we were less than, that we were inferior, whether we're talking about Black people in South Africa, Black people in the United States, Black people in Britain. We've never accepted that. Across the African diaspora, we've always pushed back and we've asserted our voice and we said, no, I am this. I am brilliant. I am a human being. I'm made in the image of God. And I think that's important for us to recognize that we are humans. We're not objects. We're not something to be discarded. We're not something to be beat on by the police or by policies that will try to say we are inferior. So I think writing our stories, lifting our voices, and shifting this narrative is something that we absolutely have to do. And we have to teach that to our children, because when in the U.S., when we're taught history, you're taught it from a white perspective. When you're taught theology, you're taught it from a white perspective. In South Africa, the white folks came and lived with you all. In the United States, our ancestors were brought from West Africa and lived with the majority. So there we were the minority. So for us, it is becoming conscious. It is challenging all of the internalized forms of racism. You know, it is a lot of countries that I go to, Black majority countries, don't realize just the importance of seeing some form of currency, a bill with a Black president on it or a Black leader. We've never had that in the United States. So you cannot tell my brothers and sisters from South Africa when they come to the US or anywhere, you can't tell them that you can't succeed because you're Black. You can't be a doctor because you're Black. Because when you look around, the doctors are Black, the lawyers are Black, the leaders are Black. In the United States, we were told we couldn't succeed because we are Black. So we push back against that narrative. We lift up examples of Black success, Black excellence, which is not limited to a degree, which is not limited to an economic status. We're talking about people who have refused to people who have chosen to live when everything around them has said die. People who are raising their children, people who are walking and helping children cross the street as they're going to school, people who are in the White House, President Obama, people who are in the pulpits, across the Black spectrum. So I think lifting up Blackness, not as a curse, not as a sin, but as something that is beautiful and something that we should take pride in. And we're not talking about Black superiority. We're not trying to be treated better than anybody. We're just saying we're just human like everybody. You know, we're human like everybody.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Shwabi, as a person in art, as a creative, what would you say? Who are we? Shwabi?
I can't quite hear very well. So I'm going to attempt to speak to the issue that you were. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So, yeah, I can't hear you for some reason. There's some challenge with my audio, so I'm going to try and sort it out. But I believe that it's important that we tell our story. And more than tell our story, it's important that we realize that sometimes we can adopt, unintentionally so, a white gaze. And to adopt a white gaze means that we are telling it from the perspective that does not recognize Africans as people or Black Americans or Black Africans as people. So we, first of all, have to see ourselves from such a gaze and learn who we are. Because if you say who we are as Black people, I believe that all people are spirit, and the spirits that we have are then housed in a body. So we cannot be defined by the skin that we have. Because if you're to look at the inward making of a person, the blood is red, you know, the mind is similar. So people cannot be said to be defined by how they look. Even so, we proudly wear our Black skin. We proudly wear the hair that we have, because it is an expression of God's goodness, an expression of God's creativity upon us.
Wow, thank you. Black identity, Black creativity. Velani.
Hi.
Velani, I think it's quite interesting, and for you guys who you were born post-apartheid, you go to private schools. Actually, we as parents, we take you to be defined by the system that is actually not even supportive of who you are, that doesn't even understand how your hair works and how they force you to even change the way your hair is, the way you speak. They try and limit the enthusiasm that comes with Blackness. What would you say who we are?
You know, I love the question, because some people would ask the first question to say, do we know who we are, as a first qualifier before we can ask, you know, who we are. I think being born in 1992, so literally at the verge of apartheid coming to an end, there's this let's call it this honeymoon phase where the country comes out of apartheid and we're still trying to figure out, is South Africa coming or going? And you have this generation of young people who are born and are kind of like the test bed of what does a post-apartheid South Africa look like. So I represent a generation that could kind of be considered an experiment, right? Given that this is the first time where Black people, white people, colored people, Indian people are supposedly living together, coming together in schools, coming together in sports teams, and trying to identify with each other in this, era that is still being defined. I think with that in mind, one has had the privilege of being, coming from a family that had always, emphasized traveling as a way to see beyond the borders of South Africa, to see what the world really looks like outside of Joburg, outside of SA. And I have also been defining myself gradually in each stage that I've come across, from primary school, high school, university, to the employment field. What I have picked up as a very, very common trend amongst us as African people is that, one, we're very resilient. So we are the one group of people that, despite having almost no resources and no opportunities given to us, we still make it regardless of what happens, right? We are the one group of people that has so much diversity amongst ourselves, but can still unite against a singular cause to chart, a path to a greater future. What I would like to probably emphasize right now as young people in South Africa is we are a lot more conscious. Right? We are a lot more conscious about, ideas around Pan-Africanism. We are a lot more conscious about the construction of the colonial borders that made the scramble for Africa. We're a lot more conscious about, the mistakes of the past. We, in fact, even politically speaking, not all of us are in 100% agreement with the negotiated settlement of 1994. So we are educated as well. So we represent a very, very diverse spectrum of young people who are vocal, resilient, educated, and committed to a better future. And I think beyond just calling ourselves Black or African, I think we all deep down in our hearts acknowledge that we are human more than we are about race, etc. Because race has always been a construct that South Africa and even the world at large has always believed in. But I think as young people, we are actually quite fed up with it and are looking beyond it. We look beyond what makes you human, beyond just being Black, beyond going to a private school, beyond having a fancy English accent, We are all those things in one. And I can assure you that we are also not apathetic. We are not people who are just going to take things as they are. And we are not a generation of people who just accept what we're told. We are people who inquire, we research, we question, we understand things, and we apply them. That's how I define us as Africans this generation.
Wow. What an interesting generation that's not going to take a no for an answer, a generation that is questioning, that is curious, that wants to know, a generation that is creative and comes up and be the solution to problems that we currently have. Themba, you and Velani grew up almost maybe at the same time, but in different types and upbringing. So it will be interesting to get a perspective of you growing up in Witbank and going to schools in the location. So what is your perspective on who we are?
All right. I think I'll start by the words of the late Steve Biko, when he said, the most potent weapon of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. So me as an individual who grew up from a squatter camp, who went to a government school, we always had the mindset of inferiority in us. That when we meet up with other kids who went to private schools, we always look down on ourselves. We always viewed ourselves as if we are not good enough. We always thought like, no, what, our lives will end up in a squatter camp, ekasi, and all stuff like that. But now, having came across people, individuals who managed to change their narrative, as Sis Rabi has indicated, that we need to change our narrative. It then individually, me personally, it changed my perspective towards who I am. Having had a relationship with God, it changed my perspective to know that I am a better person. I can achieve anything. Hence, I even managed to go to university. I managed to take opportunities that I managed to lead even white people as a president at Tshwane University of Technology. Yeah, so now it means that my mind it just came open to see things in a different perspective and who really I am as an individual.
Wow, thank you so much. I'm going to quickly read one of the questions. One says, why does it feel like we still need permission from white people to follow? Why does it feel like we need permission from whites to be follow up with this? I'm going to give this question to you, Dr. Chris, because I managed to listen to the podcast that you had or in the United States after resigning from the university that you were working in. Why does it feel like we still need permission from white people?
That's a good question. You know, I think it's because we have in many ways, white people, whiteness has been the standard against which we have judged ourselves. We judge how successful we are if we, by how closely we can approximate to whiteness. And so there is this paternalistic view that, we were taught, we always have to be, need white permission. We need white people's backing, but truthfully, we don't. And it's something that we have to unlearn. We have to be taught, we have to be trained that we are okay, we can make our own decisions. And as my sister brought up, the white gaze, that we're constantly under white supervision. And so we kind of will act in certain ways, but we have to be okay knowing, you know what, I'm gonna act the way I wanna act, knowing that I do not represent an entire group. I don't represent an entire race. I represent me. I represent God. And we have to, just really unlearn that stuff, reject that notion that we need white people's permission and that we need to make white people comfortable. White people have been the standard, right? They got to be comfortable. We can't talk about issues of race because white people are going to feel uncomfortable. They're not going to be able to handle this stuff. So it's something that we have to unlearn. Education has been an important part of that. Looking back, looking at my ancestors who just refused to give up their God-given right, their agency to speak. And as Black people, we have the ability to speak. We use our voice and our bodies to stylize time and space. The Negro national anthem is lift every voice and sing. So our voices are important to speak back to these issues, to say that I'm here, I matter, I will not make myself smaller to make you feel comfortable. And that comes with over time, developing your voice, developing an awareness of who you are. I think people still do it because they want to be accepted by white dominant society. And when people do that, it kind of pays. You see people who are advanced, if they follow white norms, they get rewarded. And for people that push against that, it seems like they are penalized. Well, we got to be willing to let the penalty come, whatever, but I want to be free and who I am. I want to be free and knowing that my Black body is accepted, my voice is accepted. So we have to push back against that narrative.
Wow. Thank you so much. I think in South Africa, there would be something called fronting, which is what you're trying to say, where Black people actually are taken into act as if they owning companies, so they can get paid, and that's then the narrative of maybe what white people are trying to tell us, that maybe we don't actually deserve to have these companies, but they can just pay us so that they keep us or keep us away or make us shut up. A question that comes up is for Mr. Nkosi. It says in reference to isiZulu, inkunzi isematholeni. The leaders of tomorrow come from the youth. Do you think the old leaders or old generation is playing its role in grooming the young to be the leaders of tomorrow?
Yeah, that question is a yes and no. There's instances where you feel the void is there. I'll give particular examples. when you look at schooling, for instance, education, and we send our children to the white schools, and they've got no role models. They've got role models as their teachers, and they follow what the teacher. You know, when a child says, "My teacher said so," so that is already the mind frame is that of a white, and is that of being less human. And you get it even in school board meetings. Parents are not prepared to take the initiative to their children as role models. And this is creating a problem. You've indicated also in business. In business, fronting is part of that. We want to hide behind whites who are successful, and they make us underdogs there. And we don't want to stand up on our own and say, I want to do this business, it's mine, and I don't believe that I need somebody to nurture me here. I can carry on my own. Partly it's because of the education we had. It still lingers in our mind. We need to free ourselves from that and be set free. And I think we can lead South Africa a lot better if all our leaders can say, we are Black, we want to lead our country as Black people. And that would carry on.
Thank you, Pochabu. This one, I think I'll give it to Sis Shwabi. What is the role of the church in addressing racial injustice?
I think the church is a valid voice that is trusted as a voice of truth. So first of all, the church is key in playing the role of helping people redefine who they are. Because if you grew up and you were taught that you are less than, you are not as worthy compared to B or whomever. So what the key role that the church helps people with is helping us define who we are, to realize that we are more than the skins that we have, we are more than the hair that we have. Indeed, those things are beautiful, and indeed we embrace them. But we are spirit made after an infinite God, and therefore we are not limited to our circumstances. So I think this is the role that the church plays, because when the church in the 90s or in the 80s began to say no to apartheid, right, began to join political parties, even when they were organizing rallies that they were saying that let's pray against apartheid, let's support those that are fighting. When the church adds its voice, there's something significant that happens in our nation. You know, people begin to realize that somehow the struggle is real. It's worth fighting, and it's worth standing with those that are being violated. So in a sense, church is the voice of justice, and church needs to play that role.
Okay, thank you. Before I come, yes.
Can I add in one comment there? Because I think my sister is absolutely right. And, you know, I would want to say that the church also must have a decolonized theology. Many churches will watch U.S. evangelists, will watch preachers from the United States, and will begin to preach messages that are not gospel. Will preach messages, the prosperity gospel, that if you just give $5, poverty is going to be broken over your life. And they don't realize that poverty was a system and a structure that was created to keep whole groups of South Africans, to disadvantage them. So by decolonizing theology, to say like, hey, that's the American prosperity gospel, that's not the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then also to hold countries, to hold individuals accountable, to say like, you created these conditions in which poverty thrives, you have to repent, you have to do something, you have to change something. So I think that also, you know, she's absolutely right. And for me, one of the things that I'm concerned about is just this, again, this desire to be like US preachers, this colonized theology where you just give some money and all this stuff's going to disappear. And if you're still poor, it's because you didn't do something right, because you didn't pray hard enough. No, it is, there were conditions that were created, and that South Africans find themselves that lead to whole group poverty, whole group disadvantage. that we have to address even in our preaching. We have to preach truth to power as well.
Wow. I'm going to read quickly what I read this morning from what the president said. He said, I quote, "Young people have turned their ideas into action. They have not let a lack of resources hinder them. They have carved a niche for themselves in a number of sectors, from high tech to environmental sustainability. They are optimistic, they are resilient and courageous, often in the face of the harshest of circumstances. They are a source of inspiration and hope. Through their action, they are building a world that is more just, equal, sustainable, and at peace." Velani, I'm coming to you. Being a young person in South Africa, I'm saying, where to from here?
Where to from here? Well, I think as Dr. Chris Howes had mentioned, about prosperity, gospel, and church. I think I'll shoot straight forward, and I think what I'll say is that where we're going has something to do with where we've come from. When you talk about the church, when you talk about politics, there's a couple of things that one needs to understand. The first is that politics is an organized minority ruling over a disorganized majority. So if people are disorganized, they're most likely going to be controlled by people who are more organized.
Wow.
The second aspect is when you look at the church or institutions, especially during the apartheid days, apart from just being institutions that would, have particular doctrines and administer the gospel on Sundays, these were very functional institutions in terms of the tasks they could administer. They would provide scholarships, they would provide housing, they'd provide healthcare, they'd provide all sorts of things to make you a better person. And one of the things I would love us to do as a society is to have institutions that teach people how to fish rather than giving them fish, right? So if we had programs in the church that spoke about, retirement annuities and financial instruments and how to invest your money, as opposed to telling us, give us your highest offering in your neighbor's pocket and you shall see the Lord will surprise you. Like, we really need to be in a position where we are very practical, we're very organized, and we can administer the tools we need to have a very, very better generation. I think as individuals in Africa, and I'll speak primarily as a young person who is, rapidly in pursuit of the future, there are three things that are currently in our favor. The first is, one, we have a very large population that is growing rapidly. So over the next 20, 30 years, maybe 40% of the population will be in Africa. So we have a very, very large population. The second is, we're coming into a generation that is very used to the idea of usership instead of ownership. So people aren't used to owning assets or they're used to using them. So that means people are very, very much committed to experiences as opposed to just owning something. The third is, we live in a world of technology and information. And with these three things in place, you have young people who are learning faster, experiencing problems faster, experiencing opportunity a lot more tangibly. And if we harness those three factors, the growing population, shared economy and technology, you're most likely going to see a more economically prosperous generation. This doesn't substitute the need for hard work or studying or anything that's very critical to where we need to be. But I do think we have a lot of what we call tailwinds blowing us in a direction which we can achieve. But of course, if we are united around the principles around African identity, if we are choosing to deliberately ignore the colonial borders that were put amongst us, we'll see a more united Africa. And I think if we want to really look at where we're going, we should look at that movie Black Panther and just look at the basic principles that they speak about: collaboration, prosperity, innovation, shared culture, shared identity, and most importantly, a world where we don't believe in greed and overconsumption. We believe in a world of content and a world of people who are willing to share and consume what they need, not what they want. So I think that's where we're going as a young people, and I'm very, very optimistic. And of course, I'll always be looking forward to learning from the likes of Babu Nkosi and everyone else on the panel who have been there before, and that we can learn from mistakes that have been made. So I think that's where we're going.
Wow. I'm going back to questions because we've got quite a lot. One is for Dr. Chris. It says, are these white-led churches decolonized? Who is leading us as Blacks in this generation?
Wow. Are the many of the
white-led churches?
Yeah, I would say many of them are not. Their baseline in the U.S., and because we export our theology, right? Our culture is one of our biggest exports. So theological culture, the norm, the standard perspective is you're taught theology from a white perspective. And in order for white privilege, for whiteness to be seen as the standard, in order for it to remain in those places, you don't examine it. It's just taken for granted. It is what it is. So we're taught theology from those perspectives. And many people across the world will just hear these preachers, the main ones that have big ministries, and they will just begin to regurgitate what they hear. They will just hear it and they'll just say it without critically thinking about it and realizing that one of the major ways that we will continue to have inequity and inequality in the world is, theology has been a major vehicle to shape the narrative that people are in the position that they're in because of something that they have done. So we have to challenge that. We have to learn from African theologians, from South African theologians, from Black theologians that give us a different perspective that will cause us to critically look at theology and say, hey, here's a problem. Here's a problem that only views sin as an individual act, but not as an act of a society. There are societal sins and structural sins that must be dealt with. And so most do not have a sufficient theology. They absolutely do not. When we say who is leading, I would say let's look at the local pastors there. We have relegated our spiritual life and our spiritual nourishment to pastors who don't even live in our areas, pastors who live on the other side of the world, who don't even know what's going on, and we just follow them, and we don't support the local pastor who is there fighting. If an uprising happens in South Africa, the pastor in the United States not coming over there to march. They're not coming over there to raise the voice. It's going to be the local pastors there. But having these conversations, sharing resources, sharing writers, sharing names, that's what's going to empower us to say, we're going to push back on theology because, quiet is kept. The gospel was all in Africa before it went to Rome. When we talk about church history, but people don't want us to know that there is a deep history. Many of the church fathers were African. Many of the church fathers were African, but they don't want us to know that.
Wow.
Can I add?
There's a question. Oh, yes, sure.
Okay, I just wanted to add to what Dr. Chris is saying, because if you remember a few years ago in South Africa, we had an incident of a certain white pastor who said he is where he is because he's worked hard. And he was saying that to Black people, to say that in order for them to succeed, they also need to work hard. Now, that seems innocent, right, on face value. But when you realize that inequality is often structural, so it doesn't matter if, for instance, you take Temba, for instance, you grew up in a squatter camp. It's not enough to work hard, because you can work hard, but if you take someone who is from a model C school or a private school, and someone who's going to a school in township, right? Those schools don't have the same resources. The children in some may be taught to critically think, but a child in a township may not have the same luxury of saying that if you get text, this is how you interact with it. So for that pastor, it was very ignorant to say that we have to work hard, because he is not acknowledging the challenges that South Africa is faced with. So I think it's key. It's key that even as the church, that we engage what it means to be equal. We engage what it means to exist in a society that is free of racial discrimination. Otherwise, if we're not doing that, then we will forever go backwards, right?
Yeah, yes. Thank you so much. I've got questions that are similar. One is for Velani, and one is for Mr. Nkosi. One says to Velani, being an alumni of the South African Washington International Program, founded by Mr. Brian Karin, the human rights lawyer who is white. I'll pose the question. Then one comes to Mr. Nkosi, and it says, Mr. Nkosi's lawyer, when he was arrested, was white. What role do white people have to play in the role of Black liberation?
Who wants to go first? I think Babu Nkosi should go first.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. My lawyer, incidentally, was Brian Karen as well. He was a human rights lawyer. So he was, Faras Mangaliso organized the lawyers for us, and he was quite an astute lawyer, but also very down to earth, accepting the dignity of a human person. He never looked at us even previously as Black people. He looked at us as human beings and that have rights and have a right to survive. So it all depends on an individual. I don't mind a white lawyer as long as the white lawyer knows he's astute and he takes me as a person, not with inferiority complex or not with superiority complex.
Wow. Velani?
Yeah, I think Brian Curry and his wife Sally, incredible people. Indeed, I was part of the South Africa Washington International Program in 2014. Incredible people. In fact, that program was the first time I had gone overseas representing my country for something that important. So it was the first real opportunity I had to be outside the country other than, travel or leisure. So kudos to Brian. I think the question on what role do white people have to play in liberation or freedom, I think one has to maybe simplify it. When you're fighting for freedom, you're either on the side of history or you're against history. And usually when you're in that battle, you don't know which direction history will swing. So you have to choose your sides. There's a famous saying that says, anyone who is silent against injustice has already chosen the side of the oppressor. And beyond calling it white people or Black people, let's just say, if we're debating an issue that matters, especially if it's a human rights issue or a dignity issue, or the fact that we are human beings, whether you're Black, whether you're white, whether you're green or purple, whatever you are, you must just decide which part of history would you like to be part of. Just a few days ago, we had Dennis Goldberg, one of the Rivonia trialists, pass away. History has told us to look at him and say, oh, he was a white person in the struggle. But in all essence, what he was doing, he was just a human being who was against the ideas of the apartheid state and was willing to choose a particular stance to fight that government. Most white people at the time just chose not to. So in answering the question, I have to say, it's not about white people or Black people. It's about which side of history do you choose to be on when history, judges you. And history is something that continues to evolve. So if we say, we want to liberate South Africans, if we want to nationalize the mines, if we want to return the land, then we asked everyone on this panel, what do you think should happen? Should we nationalize them or should we keep them in private hands? We'll all have our different perspectives. But a year from now, 5 years, 10 years from now, the history books would have been written, and they'd say, you know, the black owners of capital chose not to change the land, or some chose not to. So I think the answer is simple. Just choose which side of history you want to be on and do your best to support those ideas, regardless of what resistance you may face, black or white.
Yes. Yeah. So they have a role in fighting injustice. I think I'm going to go to Dr. Chris, because he also speaks about whiteness and anti-racism and racism in a different perspective. Could you just give us a brief, Dr. Chris?
Sure, yes. And this is regarding the role of white people.
Yes.
You know, one of the things that I really, really believe is that this is a problem, that this is white people's problem too. That this is not just our problem, that this is your problem too, in the sense that this is a human issue. This is a human issue, and white people must address this issue. One of the ways that I talk about this is, if you see, and I draw on a scholar by the name of Beverly Tatum, and when you look at whiteness, it's sort of like a conveyor belt in the airport that a person can just stand on, and the conveyor belt will just move you. And there's 3 different types of racists, she says. There's an active racist, and those are like the people in the airport who are on a conveyor belt, but yet they're running on it. You know, so the conveyor belt is moving and they're running in the same direction. Then you have people who get on the conveyor belt and they're just standing still. They're not doing anything, but the conveyor belt is still moving them. Racism is like the system of advantage based upon race is like that conveyor belt. Even if white people say, oh, well, I'm not racist, well, you're still moving in that direction. You're still benefiting from the system of advantage. An anti-racist is a person who turns around and walks the other way on the conveyor belt. You're actively walking against racism. So, you know, even if you, as my brother just said, when you say, you know, I'm not racist, I'm not wearing in the US, I'm not wearing a white robe, I'm not part of the KKK, I'm not actively going out trying to hurt black people. Well, even if you do nothing, you're still benefiting from that system of advantage. So you have to turn around. You have to, what we would call, repent, change the way you think, right? You realize that how on an everyday level you benefit from a system of advantage. And, you know, like the white pastor who said that I am where I am because you work hard. Yeah, we saying you work hard, but you don't work any harder than anybody else. I know black South Africans that work 4 or 5 times as hard as you. It's not about people who work hard. It's the advantages that you get. And the reason, you know, he works hard, but the challenges that he has faced, not one of those challenges has been as a result of the color of his skin. And that's the white privilege. Whereas black people, our skin, what people perceive about us poses some challenges in terms of how we move throughout life. So white people have to take a stand. You cannot be on the side of Jesus, who is on the side of justice. And Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. If you're going to be like Jesus, you have to speak out against injustice. And I'll say this, and back to this theology thing, we have to radically reread Jesus. Jesus protested a lot. He went into the temple and he flipped over tables because they were exploiting the poor. He protested when he saw, you know, they would bring a woman to him trapped in adultery and, you know, they wanted to stone her. He protested, he stopped, and he raised a voice to challenge the system that would do that to women. Women were considered property. We're considered property. So he challenges all of that. So to truly be like Jesus, you know, we have to be willing to speak out against injustice. We got to be willing to do that.
Wow. Wow. The last question is for you, Themba. To what extent can young South African today relate to the challenges overcome by an earlier generation? How connected are they to bigger issues of social justice?
Sorry, come again.
To Themba, to what extent can young South Africans today relate to the challenges overcome by an earlier generation? How connected are they to bigger issues of social justice?
All right.
Firstly, I'd say as young people of South Africa today, we firstly need to understand the causes or the things that which the then youth of 1976 were fighting for. First, you understand that they were fighting against the educational system, right? Which was the medium, which was in Afrikaans. So now, us as young people, I remember a couple of years back, we were fighting against for fees must fall. So it then also relate or correlate towards that we're still fighting same problems, but now in a different level. Then it was Africans, and now we're fighting for free education, of which was promised to us, but still is not happening. And it means that we still have a cause that we need to play as young people. Firstly, we need to understand the education system. Now, as much as we have education that is given to us, but most of the books that we are studying in school, starting from primary schools, are they really benefiting us as young people? You go to school, I remember I did history, but most of the history that I studied, it was about your Stalin, Lenin, Castro, World War. But we never had books which were speaking about the history of Africa. And if though some of the few information that we had, it was just information that was in passing, speaking about Shaka, but we never learned about the likes of Kwame Nkrumah. We never learned about things like your Thomas Sankara. People were real leaders of Africa who were fighting against colonization. So those are things that we as young people currently in South Africa, we need to fight for. We need to look at the educational system that now you go to university. When you get to university, first year, they'll teach you about, they'll teach you about job opportunities which are available to the career that you have chosen, and never tell you about any business opportunities which are related to that. So now we need to change the education system as young people and fight for and be more vocal about those educational systems. And also we need to value more education and understand that education is not only that which you go to class and get more knowledge about that. Education is divided into two parts. You have your formal education and you have an informal education. So mostly people who are succeeding today are people also who are valuing more also of the informal education. As they've said that we have information that is just given to us as they've been indicating that we have a lot of information given to us as young people. So we need to be able to filter that information and make it work for us. If you do human resource management, you need to understand how can I change the course or information to make it work for me in terms of business. So we still have a lot that we actually need to look for. We also need to look into economic emancipation for young Black South Africans, because I like the example that they've given, Doctor has given now about the ramp. I saw this, I think during the week, there was an example I saw on Facebook that people who are, let's say white people, they're already privileged. You know, when they go to university, already they have secured employment back from their home. They already have land that they need to follow, have been given to them. But how much about us as young Black South Africans? We go to university, we study 4 or 5 years, we then go back home and stay because we have no opportunities and we don't have any advantages. So those are discussions that actually as young people, we need to be aligned to.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of our session, but it has been so informative. There are so many questions that I have here, which shows the need that we have on having platforms like this, where people can come together and come up with practical ideas that we can do to alleviate to elevate issues that our young people have. I'm just going to give you a few minutes to quickly just give us your closing statement. Please, Ms. Nkosi.
What Temba was on about, thank you. Following what Temba was saying about our education system, I think that's where the lack is. We are so unionized even in the education system, and the unions are not really working for the people. The education system is not changing. because we are still teaching people to be job seekers rather than job creators. It's very, very important that we transform that system, because we are forever beggars to go and search for work. The business magnates, unfortunately, they belong to the other class and will forever be slaves for them. But if the system changes from grassroots, that we teach and we educate people to be job creators, not job seekers, we'll have a different country as well.
Wow. Thank you. Dr. Chris?
Thank you so much. This has been definitely an informative and enlightening conversation for me. And I think we should definitely keep in mind that this struggle is international, that we are connected. Geographically, we are separated, but we are connected. And at the root of this, we, as a pastor, I always remind people that what we are facing is, at the root of it, is a spiritual issue, a spiritual principality and a power that has come to divide us, that has come to render some folks inferior, some folks superior. And we have to lean in and press into the power of the Holy Spirit, who is one person who will disrupt the status quo, whether it is breaking the tradition of not having men and women to pray in the same room. In Acts chapter 2, he has them praying together when they receive the Holy Spirit. In Acts chapter 10, he sends Peter to the Gentiles, challenging Peter's tradition, his mindset about who and what God can use. And then when you see in Acts chapter 11 and 13, the church at Antioch, which is going against the norms of class division, of gender division, of ethnic division, that the Holy Spirit is raising us up as change agents. He's raising us up as individuals that he can use to disrupt the status quo. We have to keep imagining freedom. We have to keep imagining what is the world that God wants us to live in. What would the kingdom of God look like if it invaded my neighborhood, if it invaded my schools, if it invaded the healthcare system? That's what we want to keep working toward. We want to continue to trust in him, continue to have hope, and to ask for Holy Spirit resources. One of the things when Europeans stole my ancestors and our brothers and sisters from West Africa, it wasn't just a taking of bodies, it was also a taking of brains, of ingenuity, brilliance, to be able to come here and to create. I mean, the United States is what it is today because of African ingenuity. It's still there, still have it. We have to come together, organize, strategize, work together, and we can make the world a better place for our children.
Oh, wow. Wow. Shrabi?
Thank you so much. I think three key things as we go forward for young people that I desire for them. One, be aware of who you are. Be aware what your history means to you and how it shapes your future going forward. And secondly, decolonize, as in redefine what success means outside of the standard of whiteness. You know, redefine what excellence means and pursue it. And thirdly, and maybe lastly, every time we have a movement that has a particular hashtag, use that to have action that people can take to change the circumstances of our struggles.
Wow. Thank you so much. Velani?
I think my closing remarks would probably to emphasize four things as young people. The first is that we should be brave. So above all things, just have the courage to do things that matter. The second is to collaborate. So this journey is not one where we succeed on our own, but we should succeed together. The third is to be resilient. So we must constantly push the boundaries of society to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. And the fourth one, which is probably my favorite one, is get organized. Amongst all things, young people, let's just get organized. You know, if you're united and organized in things, you can have greater direction and greater force in achieving your goals. That's my parting words.
Okay, thank you so much. Themba?
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. My closing remarks will be based on changing our mindset as young people. Because you can be given a lot of opportunities, but if you still have a wrong mindset, you will remain where you are. It is important that you know about your history, but don't allow your history to consume you to a point that you become hate. You hate other people, because if you start doing that which the oppressor was doing, it sets you not different from being the oppressor yourself. So change your mindset and know that there are a lot of opportunities which are given to us as young people. Also, it is very important that we become familiar with organizations in South Africa that are there to help young Black people to succeed in terms of education, in terms of entrepreneurship. And let us also align ourselves with the things like your National Development Plan, because that's where it gives us an idea where the country is going. And so that whatever education or things that we put as ideas, they become aligned towards where the country is going.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to just summarize. And one of the things that was said was, if people are disorganized, they are more likely to be controlled by those who are organized. I think it's so profound what we have learned today, that as young people moving forward, they need to be organized, they need to collaborate, they need to keep imagining freedom. They need to not allow themselves to be consumed by the history that will push them to hate. And also the role of the church was actually quite defined as well today. So I just want to say thank you so much to each and every one of you that came out to be here and empower and transform and educate us. Like I said, you are all expecting your own journey of life. We appreciate your time. We appreciate all our followers that were on Facebook. We hope this was an informative session. So I think the future looks bright. We cannot wait to see you guys again next year when we celebrate the Youth Day. Please be safe. Please always remember to extend the hand to those that are in need. Thank you so much. Lest we forget who we are, where we have been, and where we are going. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.